Well, Jim told me to introduce Carla. So difficult for me, you know. Carla is a 20 years old girl. She studied at American Community School, and she's today studying in University of Virginia. High distinction, all. Although she is only 21 years old, but affected by God and by her mother, she visited more than 42 countries all over the world, visiting the poor, lived with the poor, and supporting the needy people. With all love and with all pride, I introduce the best jewel God has given me, Carla.
For such a wonderful introduction. It's always been such an honor to be his daughter. The National Prayer Breakfast has a sort of energy, a vibe, that takes over someone and it really doesn't make sense, but it transforms you. For example, growing up, I could never even look at a Jewish person. I always associated them with being Israeli, and I had a tension in my heart growing. In fact, the first Jewish Israeli person I've ever met in my life was here in the National Prayer Breakfast. I was sitting in the Middle Eastern suite when a man wearing a kippah walked in. And I remember feeling outraged. How dare he even think he had the right to walk into the suite, I told my friends. Ironically, Danny Petro, Samir Petro's son, who is originally Palestinian, was the one who reminded me that Israel was part of the Middle East. But I laughed and I dismissed what he had to say. I was very stubborn. So he walked in, and it was a year after the Lebanese-Israeli war in 2007. And he asked Danny if he could do his tie. And as Danny went to the bathroom, we were left alone. I provokingly asked him where he's from, of course knowing the answer. Israel, he told me. Oh yeah? Well, I'm from Lebanon, southern Lebanon, even though my family's from the west. And the room grew really silent and still. And he broke that silence and he told me, you know, it's funny how our countries are at war, yet here we are tying ties. I couldn't help but laugh and shake this man's hand, an action I never thought to be able to do in my life. And since that moment, something inside me has changed. A year after that, my school in Beirut was asked to participate in Model United Nations in Georgetown, Qatar. And the only problem was this country we were asked to represent was Israel. None of my friends wanted to take the role. They all wanted to pass on such an honorable opportunity for that mere reason. But I stepped up. I took the role, knowing it wasn't going to be an easy one. And when I returned to Lebanon, I returned with an award in my hand. It read, Diplomacy Award, Carla Krediye, representing the American Community School of Beirut, Delegate of Israel. Two words that were very controversial to be printed on the same page at that time. But instead of hanging it on my bedroom wall, I hid it in a drawer, for I feared that people would criticize me for taking on such a role, instead of recognizing the effort that I put into such a task. Last spring, I was privileged enough to take on a semester at sea, where I got to visit 15 different countries all over the world. 12 of those countries, I met Israeli IDF soldiers, some of whom were stationed too far from my home in the war. It was very difficult for me, but by the time I reached the end, I was in South Africa, and I hiked to the top of Table Mountain, where I met this young woman who was not too far from my age. So I approached her and asked her where she was from. She explained to me that she was Israeli and she'd just finished military service. And when I told her I was Lebanese, that same hatred and tension I felt towards that man walking into the suite, I saw and felt in her eyes. My automatic reaction, for whatever reason, was to swing my arms open and hug her. And as I did that, she began to cry and cry and cry. And she made me cry alongside with her. And as we sat in each other's arms in that top of that mountain, everyone was looking at us. But then she finally caught her breath and told me that I was the first Lebanese person she'd ever met in her life. Maybe the problem is we've dehumanized the issue to such a point that we forget that there are real people on both sides. And that's why I truly believe in the mission of the National Prayer Breakfast, because it's helped me overcome that. And I hope that one day it will touch enough people with its energy that I'll be able to take that diploma, that award, out of my hand and hang it high on my bedroom door, on my bedroom wall. Thank you very much.